So I'm going to turn this over to Kathleen Lane. And before I do, I'm going to stop sharing and I'll introduce her while she's going to share her screen with us. But Kathleen Lane is a professor in the Department of Special Education at the University of Kansas. She's an Associate Vice Chancellor for Research. She is currently the President-elect for the Council for Exceptional Children Division of Research. She's a co-editor. I don't know when she sleeps, but she's a co-editor for the Remedial and Special Education Journal and the Journal of Positive Behavior Interventions. She's published over 200 journal articles, 11 books, many book chapters. And what I will tell you from my experience is that I think she is one of the most exceptional people at taking the research that she does so well and creating a bridge through her resources, her books and publications to allow those of us who work to bridge that work between research and practice so effortlessly. I've been using her materials and resources for years. So I thank you for your time today and your expertise. And so without further ado, I'm going to ask Kathleen, and she'll introduce her colleague Wendy to take us for this journey today.
Great, thank you so much. And I appreciate everybody logging in. Wendy and I are so appreciative. Wendy Oakes is an associate professor at Arizona State University, and she is a treasured friend and colleague. And one of the things that I am so thankful for about being able to partner with Wendy is that we share the same commitment that you all share about looking for the most effective, efficient ways to support kids that need more than Tier 1 has to offer. We've had a lifetime commitment to working to actually look for kids at the first sign of concern. We're both classroom teachers. I've been a general ed teacher and a special ed teacher. We've been behavior specialists. We've covered a lot of ground. And Kim, I am honored by your kind words because there's we do have a huge commitment to making sure that the lessons that we're learning are quickly getting in the hands of educators. And it's truly an honor to be here today. So we want to thank you both for this work. And as we get started today, I wanted to let you know that what we're going to be sharing is some new and some continuing information. We have a paper under review right now that talks about a lot of what we're going to be sharing today, and we'll keep you posted on that. But we wanted to show you as we get started today where you can access this presentation. And I noticed that Patty put it in the chat, which is perfect. If you want what you're looking at today in your hands in an editable way, Wendy and I have posted it on our website under presentations. So if you click on presentations and scroll down beneath that first picture, you're going to be able to download this so that you could pull out pieces that might be relevant to you as you do your own information sharing. I also want to point out to you some resources before we get started. On ci3t.org, if you go to the tab that says the COVID, and I just want to briefly point this out before we get started because we're going to be referencing some of these measures. So if you click on the COVID tab, and I am going to show you what that looks like. So if you click over here and you click over here on responding to COVID, when we start talking about using your tiered system approach to supporting educators as they come back, and also about connecting with families, I want to show you that we've been doing some of this building work together because the whole premise of screening, we have to be prepared to respond to screening when we are starting to do that. And I think some of you have heard us say for years, if you screen, you have to have a plan to intervene. So for that, we start off by making some resources for families here. And like many, we pivoted swiftly to get this done. Then we received the feedback, that's great, but not all my family speak English. So we translated things into Spanish. And it's very practical things like helping families to use low intensity supports like behavior specific praise, active supervision, building a schedule for their home. And then some people said, that's great, but our families don't want to read anything. So we made videos. And then some people said, that's great, but our families don't have time to watch a video, so make infographics. So I just want you to know there's tons of resources there. And as we're learning and growing, those things will be there as well. So here's what we're going to talk about today. We are going to get started with the idea of systematic screening, but we want to situate that within your tiered system, because the good news about what's happened is that for the first time nationally, we are in a position where screening is a priority for just about everybody. 100% of the people have responded to the situation to know that our kids are coming back to what George Sugai talks about potentially being a better new normal. Because in school systems now, we've all got this priority placed on making sure that we are prepared to meet kids' social and emotional well-being needs in the same way that we are going to support their positive behavior and their academic considerations. So as we're talking about guidance for screening in this year ahead, I want you to know that we're going to first start about the system that you've built and setting up for success so that when you do start screening, and we're going to give you some practical, concrete things to do, we want to make sure you have a clear path forward for using those data that you collect in the fall. But the shorter answer is, should you screen in the fall? Absolutely, without question. But we want to do it cautiously, because one of the things we're all clear on is nobody has done any psychometric studies on how screening tools function in this context. It's brand new for all of us. So we're going to talk today about, yes, move forward, but proceed with caution. We're going to encourage you to partner with people to see how your screening tools function. And Wendy and I will be extending opportunities to districts. We already have plans for partnering with people to move that forward. So we'll let you know what those are. And then we do want to talk about using multiple sources of data. So that's like the advanced organizer of what we're going to get to. But first, we're going to start with just a moment to breathe. And I truly want to thank you, because historically, these have always been the kids that Wendy and I have been interested in, looking for kids with emotional and behavioral challenges. These are the kids that are near and dear to our heart as former special educators. And we have created a lifetime of work about actually looking for kids at the first sign of concern and jumping into support. And when we think about all of the kids in schools, even before this COVID situation, so when before this even started, if you were to take a picture of all of public schools across the United States of America, you would actually find that in that snapshot, approximately 12% of all school-age kids, kindergarten to 12th grade, have some type of internalizing issues like shy, anxious, or withdrawn, or acting out behaviors like non-compliant aggression. And some kids, if you see that overlap, have both. And in that same snapshot, it's actually 20% of school-age kids that have mild to severe challenges. So this has already been an issue. And when some people think that, okay, that's not my problem as a general educator, they're going to get referred, they're going to go to special ed, and they're going to get help in another way. That's simply not the case. Less than 1% of all school-age kids with significant behavior challenges go on to receive special education under that category of emotional disturbances. And so my sincere thanks to Kim and to Patty and the APBS networks, because this commitment to tiered systems is exactly what we need. And when we think about the tiered systems that you've built, we are making priorities on integrated systems to meet kids' multiple needs. I don't think there is going to be one human being that starts this fall that's going to be untouched by what's happening right now in this COVID era. Many of us have people that we have loved, that we have lost. We've got families that we're worried about. We're concerned about our kids. We've got aging parents. Employment's at 41 million people unemployed. I think the point prevalence estimates are going to increase. And so we need to be prepared to bring kids back in a way that levels the playing field for kids, where we are specifically addressing their social and emotional well-being, providing positive behavior intervention supports, and attending to their academics. And that's a tall issue, because teachers are in the same situation. They're dealing with the same stressors as well.
Did you get that from driver's ed?
I think somebody might want to mute, or is that perfect? Okay, thank you so much. So today we're going to talk about one integrated approach to moving forward, specifically a model that Wendy Oakes and I have been working on for a comprehensive integrated three-tiered models of prevention. And we're going to talk about how screening data, how that structure, just like Kim was saying at the very beginning, use what you have to make this pivot to online or remote or hybrid. So whatever your system is, I'm not suggesting you change it, I'm suggesting you use it. So we want to think about how to use your system in the days ahead. And we're going to be talking about what to do with the screening data as you pursue those in the time ahead. And I want to be really clear, this work is based on literally thousands of teachers and thousands of kids. We've had the opportunity to partner from coast to coast, and we host monthly calls very similar to what Kim and Patty host here today. So we'll connect you with those resources at the end, and we'll give you my cell phone in case you have questions. But I want to explain a little bit about the context in the system that we've been working for a while. In this model that we've been doing, we use comprehensive integrated three-tiered CI3T, comprehensive integrated three-tiered model of prevention. PBIS is 100% at the core, same exact recommendations from the National Center, with one exception, that rather than it being just the committee of people that are deciding on those school-wide expectations, we actually have a survey, so you can actually survey all adults in the building to find out what the adults think kids need to know to be successful, and you're welcome to it. That tool's on ci3t.org. But PBIS is at the core, and you can think about CI3T as a broadening of MTSS. It's broadened to actually address social and emotional learning at tier 1. So the base of kids' experience in CI3T is actually leveling the playing field to know what is expected of all kids at tier 1 and explicit instruction in social and emotional learning. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. The journey of CI3T actually started in 1996, and we have worked in hundreds of schools across the country, in Arizona, in California, in Pennsylvania, in Alabama, Tennessee, Kansas, blah, blah, blah. And I want you to know that this is not a theoretical thing. It's not just a research thing. It's actually a practical thing. So there have been hundreds of people that have touched this model and have influenced how it's done. So what I'm going to show you a little bit right now is what this is, and then how screening data are used to connect kids to supports. And I want you to be thinking about your system right now and how your system is going to be to set up to support the screening data that you're going to bring in the fall when kids come back. So when we think about tier 1, we want to think about what the academic experience is going to be for kids as they return. We want to think about what PBIS is going to look like in a remote or a hybrid situation or in person. And we want to think about what you're going to do at tier 1 for social and emotional learning. In our schools that we've been partnering with, they have each adopted at the district level a validated social and emotional well-being curriculum. And it's literally taught at tier 1. So when kids come to school, like if this was a classroom and done remotely, I'd have my expectations up, and I would be teaching my soft skills and those social and emotional well-being. So like linking it kind of back to Castle. And all those are going to be done in an integrated way to support kids in accessing the instruction. That's what tier 1 is going to be. So rather than well-intended people working in silos, rather than one group looking at academic data, one group looking at office discipline referral data, and one looking at referrals for mental health considerations, CI3T integrates that into one leadership team. That whole thing is tier 1. So every single student, gen ed, special ed, gets that tier 1 experience. And now when we want to thinking about what that's going to look like in the year ahead, we need to be thinking about what does that system look like when kids start returning. And I know different schools are going to do this different ways. We were talking about it before we started. Some schools are going to start off in person. Some are going to start off in a complete remote digital environment. Some are going to have a hybrid situation where kids might be doing online instruction 2 days a week and face-to-face the other 2. But we want to make sure that we define for the adults, because remember, we're going to create the student experience by first creating the adult experience. So we want to be very clear for our faculty and staff what the plans are. If this was going to be my classroom next year, I would have my expectations, much like you see here, with plans for a digital environment, so that I'm going to show kids that the things that we were doing last year when we were in person together, that same safety, that same positivity, that same productivity is in place. And we need to be prepared, as you heard from George Sugai, to be prepared for the kids that are going to come back with heightened levels of internalizing, heightened levels of externalizing. And so we want to make sure that we are set up for success. In conversations with some of our district partners, I was talking to an assistant superintendent, and she was saying how thankful she is that they already had the model in place. So like they went with second step as their social and emotional well-being component. And so they're not dumping that to do something else. And right now people are getting bombarded with all those different resources. They're sticking with what they've got. They're using their lessons. And I love, Nikki, thank you for nodding your head. It's very reinforcing. I want to high five you for that little pandemic praise right there. Thank you. So we don't want to bring in something new. We want to thread that continuity for our kids across the year. And so when we think about coming back in the new normal, you're going to take whatever model you built, like in CI3T, it's an entire year to build that process. I urge you to be clear in your system and now to operationalize what that's going to look like in your school, in your district in the year ahead. So what is tier 1 going to look like in a remote situation? What is it going to look like in a hybrid situation? What is it going to look like in a face-to-face situation? And as you think about all the work that you've already done to prepare these tiered systems, whether it is just like Kim was mentioning at the beginning of the call, if it's PBIS, if it's MTSS, any tiered system, we just now need to be thinking about shifting, pivoting to use our structure to meet kids where they are when they come back. In a CI3T model, each school actually has an implementation manual, and it defines what is for everybody, for some, and for a few. And you probably have blueprints like this at your buildings as well. And now we're going to think about what do we need to do to modify this to clarify what those different levels of prevention are going to look like. In a CI3T model, those 3 domains, academic, behavior, and the social and emotional component, when people go through a building process, we're actually saying, what do kids need to know? What do faculty and staff need to know? What do families need to know? What do administrators need to be accountable for? And now, as we step into this COVID era, when kids come back to this new normal, we want to keep clear plans in place so we can distill this confusion down to here's what you can expect as a student and what we're looking for from you academically and behavior and socially. And we're going to do the exact same thing for teachers. Teachers, everybody's looking for some direction on what it's going to look like next year. And we know that it could be whiplash. Like, it could be like we say we're going to go do this one thing and it may switch 6 weeks later. So we'd love for you to put one blueprint together where teachers have what they need digitally or hard copy to know that when we're face to face, here's how we're going to support kids' multiple needs academically, behaviorally, and in terms of social and emotional well-being. And when we're not face to face, here's the plan. Because we all just need to take a deep breath and thinking about how to move that forward. What I mean by that is think about the concrete components. So this is like an example from a CI3T under traditional school experiences. The teachers might have been asked to do 90 minutes of math. It might have been 135 minutes of ELA. 100% of the plans have plans like for teaching at the classroom level, the good lessons that we've been learning from Brandy Simonson and Jen Freeman about these low intensity strategies like using behavior specific praise, building in instructional choices, doing active supervision. We're going to need to figure out what that looks like in these new digital environments. And when we think about that PBIS component, like teaching the expectations like we just saw, we're going to do that. And we still need to be prepared to respond to challenging behaviors in a way that is respectful and keeps instruction moving forward. And you heard George say this last time when he was with you, that it is critical we not ask a student to leave a Zoom classroom meeting because your probability of you getting those kids back is like nil. So positive, productive, inclusive, and realizing we're all a little on edge. We're all a little more fragile than normal, which is why, thank goodness, many of you already have a commitment to social and emotional learning. So if you're a school that's been using positive action or connect with kids or second step, I'm not advocating for a specific program. I'm just saying keep going with it. Because now is the time to teach those kids that all those soft skills that they've been learning all along, now we're going to use them, like that ability to calm down, to self-regulate, to make some good decisions. If I made a decision that didn't work well for me, and we're watching that happen right now in a lot of states like Kansas, where we're seeing increases in surge in cases, is because people have made some choices that aren't so hot. So what can I do differently? And once that's all decided, we need to teach it to all faculty and staff. We need to teach that and we need to reinforce it. We're going to ask teachers to engage in this learning environment in a new way, and we have to do it in a way that's not going to burn everybody out. And we're going to actually have to have data just like normal to know, is the plan that you said you were going to do actually in place? It's not like, You know, when I joined Weight Watchers years ago and I had the app on my phone, and I did have that app, and I belonged to a gym and I drove by it twice a day, and my weight was only going up because I wasn't doing it. You know, it was a great graph and I'm sure it would work, but fidelity was low. So when we think about this, we need to think about what can you reasonably and feasibly put in place and support, because before you screen, you have to have a very clear plan of what's going to happen at tier 1 and how you plan to use the data. And one thing that Wendy and I really emphasize is supporting teachers right now more than ever, learning how to teach in an integrated way. Yes, we have our academic objective, but what's the behavioral thing? Like when we think about behavior expectations, like what do kids need to know about being respectful in that lesson we're going to do? And then how can I start to use some of these like low intensity supports, even virtually? So it might be Claudia is teaching a class and she says, okay, I want to make sure kids are engaged when they get there. So she might have a starter activity that has two questions, 2 journal prompts. And then she's going to say to kids, all right, everybody, as we get coming into Zoom today, I would love for you to pick one of these questions to ask and answer. And I'd just like you to put in the chat your initial thoughts. So a quick starter activity to get kids engaged, and then they can start reading each other's responses. And I'm going to ask myself, did I do the strategy that I said I was going to do? And I'm going to remind people about, you know, the respectful ways we're going to treat each other, show empathy. Like when somebody is sharing that they've had a loss or they've had a challenge or they had a hard evening, we want to make sure that we're teaching our kids empathy. So we're going to pull this all together. So the behavior, the social skills isn't something we do separate from instruction. We do it while we teach. So yes, we teach those lessons with fidelity on soft skills, but we weave them into the fabric of our daily instruction. And that is important that teachers have these tools, especially now more than ever, because people are nervous. Like, how do I keep kids engaged? How do I get kids to come to my remote and learning experiences? And how do I keep them engaged in meaningful ways? We are learning amazing things from some of our district partners. These 3 things that I'm showing you right now are some of the ways that some of our principal partners have been communicating these new sets of expectations with their faculty and staff. And like when they came to some trainings with us, they saw the family resources. So that CI3T leadership team, they mailed stuff out to their faculty and staff and said, here's a great resource for family, like setting up for success at home. And in your PowerPoint, if you click this link, it'll walk through the little video that she did. One of the principals also has been doing some virtual behavior specific praise for her adults as they were engaging in their remote instruction during the springtime. So she made that little positive postcard, which we had shared with her, and that's on our website. It's on the COVID, responding to COVID page, top right-hand corner. You can download that. And so she actually emailed to them with a little video. And I'm showing you these as concrete ways to show you that this is possible, to still use those same principles about teaching and reinforcing and using data. So when you're thinking about doing the same acknowledgement systems for your kids, let's help our teachers think about what is realistic. And please, no new systems. Still stick with the idea of tickets. Don't shift to points or something different, because someday we're going to all go back together and we want a program for generalization. But think about what they might look like. So, and it can be something, again, no cost, staying after on Zoom with a friend, having a virtual teacher lunch date, depending on what's important, and ask our kids what they want. They're very smart. And I say all that to set us up for screening, because if we don't have a tier 1 plan, there is no point in screening, because you first need to know, is tier 1 happening as you planned it, like with fidelity? And now I need to be ready to screen in this new environment so that I can connect kids to tier 2 supports, so that I can connect kids to tier 3 supports. And it might be like when you get your screening data, oftentimes like in traditional environments, people would say, oh my gosh, Kathleen, you're not going to believe this. We've got 42% of our kids screening in the yellow. What do I do? You know, it's like, I just want everybody to remember they were there yesterday. So take a breath and know that we're going to move forward. And if you got that many kids showing up as having tier 3 or tier 2 or tier 3 needs, that is a tier 1 issue. We got work to do. And so right now, like looking ahead for next year, when you screen in the fall, we want to make sure that we've got a clear plan for thinking about what to do. And if it were me, I'm expecting higher rates of internalizing issues coming back. So when I think about this, the lessons that I'm going to teach at tier 1, I would do a ton right now with internalizing issues. How, like I heard Kim talk earlier about, box breathing and strategies to really, regulate in a positive way. So if you would, I'd like you to know that this is a journey, as you know, and thinking about ahead for next year, would you please be willing to just take a moment? We're going to take about 2 minutes right now. And if you would type into the chat, if you feel comfortable doing so, some of the things that you're hearing right now that you're doing well. What do you have in place? Have you already thought about expectations for what it's going to look like in a hybrid situation? If so, dump that into the chat. Have you already had a commitment to social and emotional learning? Do you have a program selected? So go ahead and dump some of those ideas in the chat if you would. And what you're writing about is the pieces that you feel you have in place at tier 1 to be ready to support kids before you screen. Great. Wonderful. I love it. One person typed in there a commitment to revamping tier 1. And some people are calling that a reset and a re-entry. Love it. Got some people that already have some clarity on what the PBS foundation is. They feel like they're well prepared for that, ready to put it into a digital environment. Fantastic. So now, let's say you've got this in place. You've got your system and you're thinking about different ways you can teach it and reinforce and acknowledge kids' behavior. Now we want to think about how to connect kids using the screening data that you're going to collect in the fall and moving them through the tiers. Whatever screening tool you pick, you want to stay with that same screening tool for next year. And that is people's first question is, should we be continuing to screen? And we would say yes. So our first recommendation is continue to screen, but screen with caution, because right now, whether you're using the student risk screening scale for internalizing or externalizing, or you're using the SABRS, or you're using the BAS 3 best, you want to continue to use it with fidelity, but realize there's been no psychometric studies about how those work in a virtual environment. But you want to move forward with that, but you want to engage in really good partnership with people who can help you look at the accuracy of those data as they come together. So if you are a school that's using like the SRSS, these same cut scores, you should not change. People also have been asking us, should we add other items to the screening tools? And the answer is no. They are validated. That's right, Denise. Thank you for shaking your head. No, don't do it. We want to make sure that you're using the tool with procedural integrity so that when you get this information back, you can continue to connect these data to past years. I don't recommend shifting screening tools right now either, because they're just like Ames Web and Dibbles are not interchangeable. The same is true for behavior screenings. These are data from a real elementary school that we work with. They started CI3T in 2014. These are their fall data over time. And they are, as you can see, and you should not draw any causal conclusions because this is just descriptive information, but you see the percentage of kids in the low risk category and getting bigger over time. Same school, internalizing issues. Look at this. When they started, they had about 56% of their kids in the low risk range for internalizing. That was their biggest issue. This school right now, what they're doing is they're looking at their screening data, their last screening time point, and they didn't screen in spring because the world fell apart for them. So they're using their winter to anticipate what's coming back. They're using those data to connect with families, to check on kids, to make sure they're okay. We've got one district where there was a problem with some of the fidelity of the winter time point. Like some teachers just didn't get to it, which was unusual for that district. And now they're like, dang, like I need that information now to know how to support kids. So when we think about being able to unpackage it, like go back. If you've been screening, go back right now. Take your last time point, unpackage it, look at grade levels. Because remember, those kindergartners from last year are going to be first graders. Those first graders are going to be second graders. If you're in middle school, if you've been in a middle school or high school setting, remember, it's not every teacher screening every single period. We are looking at progress over time. And now I've got this transparency. If you've already been screening, use that to see who do you anticipate to be at heightened risk? Connect with those families right now. And remember that all those things we've learned before, like we've learned in the past, like, and I'm like the SRSS IE, I focus on that because that's a big part of our research because we want to have a free access screening tool. We've learned things that like kids who started off the year in the green had on average 1.5 office discipline referrals earned at the end. Kids that started off the year in the yellow category, moderate, they earned on average 5. Kids that started off the year at high risk, they earned on average 8. We know that those fall scores predict how kids do behaviorally. We know that predicts how they do academically. At the high school level and the middle school level, we know that kids that start off the year at heightened risk are more likely to end the year with lower grade point averages and fail more classes. And it takes literally 15 minutes to screen your entire school. So yes, we should keep screening, but now we need new quick studies, quick turnaround to say, does it still work? So like at Larry's school, when they screen in fall, they're going to want to look to see how does it progress in the COVID era? Does it predict how kids do? And we want to be able to support schools who have been doing this on their own. These are data from a high school principal who sent these to us saying, look what's happening in our building over time. And he's seeing shifts in internalizing. He is seeing shifts in externalizing. And I have to tell you, as a mother of 2 kids, a 24 and a 20-year-old, the group of kids I'm most worried about constantly are the kids with internalizing issues. The kids with externalizing issues, we know who they are. They suit up, they show up, they're never absent. And the kids with internalizing are the ones I worry about because their behaviors do not interrupt instruction. So they're not as likely to get noticed. So when you're thinking about your system, pay attention to all the same guidelines as before. Do screen, keep it secure, share it appropriately. Item level data should not be used. So it's not like Wendy scored a 3 on stealing, so she needs a stealing interventions. Screening tools work because you're looking to see, do these behaviors occur together into a high enough degree? Because if they do, that is the cause for concern. And then when you're thinking about screening resources and coaching protocols and getting started for next year, stay tuned. On our website, by the end of the month, you will see updated coaching protocols to guide people through that process. Give me a thumbs up if you have your camera on and you are somebody that is already screening in your building. Awesome. So stay with it. And if you're not screening yet, then pick a tool that you can sustain over time. This is not like a one year kind of thing. Pick something that you can sustain over time. And on that website, you can go through and check out a whole range of different screening tools. But once you've selected it and you've installed it, then what we're going to do next year is we're going to look at it. These are data from a school in North Carolina. The first time they screened, that's the percentage of kids in the low, moderate, and high risk category for reading, math, pro-social behavior, and motivation to learn. We know when data come back like this, that's a tier 1 issue. You're not going to try to put all those kids into extra supports. I am going to start by empowering tier 1. That's different than this middle school, where you've got an opportunity for to really focus on meeting kids' needs who have tier 2 and tier 3 needs. The other thing I want to say is you're going to be able to use your data in this coming year together with other sources of data. Pull down kids' reading, pull down kids' math, pull down their externalizing and internalizing. And remember, this year, attendance is going to be particularly, just like normal. Like we want to make sure, like if kids are not there, school is a must be present to win game. So our first goal is going to be able to get kids there. And then as a teacher, like if you look at your screening data and realize I've got more than 20% of my kids that are feeling challenged, then we need to put these tools in the hand of every teacher. We need to have on-demand, free access, professional learning resources to teach teachers how to do these strategies in virtual environments to keep our kids engaged online or engaged in the building, realizing there's a lot of competing anxieties and things that are happening for them. Now, I do want to show you that on our website, if you go under professional learning, you will find these little blue bars. And if this is all, you're welcome to it. Like if you want to do active supervision or instructional choice or high probability requests, you can download stuff. There's presentations, there's fidelity checklists, go use it. You could do a strategy a month in your buildings if you wanted to. So when you click on those, you'll find a PowerPoint presentation, something you can email to a teacher. So it's built for you. You don't have time to make this stuff. So go ahead and use that because you want to make sure that teachers are feeling set up for success. And then even with all that in place, solid integrated tier 1, clarity on tier 2 is still going to need to be there. So you're going to have to start to think about, how will I do check-in and check-out in a tier 2 environment? And I want you to think about tier 2 in terms of intensity. My daughter is 20. She's wonderful. Love everything about her. She is a competitive CrossFitter. And, 5 years ago, I really wanted to spend time with her before she left for college. And I'm like, hey, why don't we go to yoga together to spend time together? And she's like, no offense, mom, but yoga's for old ladies. And I'm like, okay, shots fired, whatever. So I'm like, how about we go to Zumba? So we went to Zumba together, and I thought it was fairly stunning. And she's like, that can never, ever happen again. She's like, if you want to hang out with me, you can go to the box. You can go to the gym with me. So I go in, and in my very first class, like Katie's over there doing handstand push-ups. And this guy says to me, hey, Kathleen, come on over here, lay on this box. So I lay on this box, and he puts this ab mat pillow there. And I'm like, what's that for? And he's like, well, I'm going to have you go like this to pretend to do push-ups on this bot. And that ab mat is in case you lose control. I don't want you to hit your head. And then she's on the rig, and she's doing chest to bars. And then he's like, come here, Kathleen. And he puts this giant rubber band on that rig. And then I step my foot into there, and there's still no movement. So he's like, you need 2 rubber bands. So I got tier 3'd on that, but that's okay. Point being is, when we think about what tier 2 and tier 3 is going to look like next year, it's not going to be all small group and that kind of thing. Likely there might be some, but we want to think about tier 2 as low intensity supports like self-monitoring, having kids engage in evidence-based practices to stay engaged, suit up, show up, attempt to do the next right thing. And your screening data are going to need to be used to make that happen. And when we put kids in tier 2 and tier 3 supports, just like always, we need to know, is it happening? How do kids feel about it? And is it working? And that social validity piece is asking kids, are you comfortable with this support? We need to ask them, because if they tell you up front that, I would be embarrassed to have that self-monitoring thing happening, then we need to do that in a private way or pick a different intervention, and know that we don't just leave them in these tier 2 forever. We need to make sure that we're connecting to the support that they need and exiting them when they don't need it anymore. And if they need something like a tier 3 support, like a functional assessment-based intervention or a de-escalation plan, we will absolutely do that. But let's make sure that that is what they need. And some kids are going to need that right away. So if you would take just 2 minutes, jot some additional ideas in the chat about what do you feel like you already have in place that you're prepared to do with your screening data in terms of tier 2 or tier 3 or those low intensity supports. And I do understand the concern about, gosh, it'd be a lot to introduce screening right now during a crisis. I get that, those kids, but you also want to be prepared to know who is at heightened risk when they come back. And you also need to be prepared to know what the magnitude of the concern is for your building, so you know how to move forward. So we want to be cautious on those things. Great question. So if you would, go ahead and let's play the school game for just a second. Terrific. And as Patty mentioned, there's also the National Center, PBS, on screening. We've got great resources on there, and it's been such a gift to get to be a part of the National Center. Wendy and I and others, Lisa Powers and so on, have all made screening briefs on how to pick a screening tool, how to get it in place, how to make sure it's going correctly. So lean on those resources there. Fantastic. Thanks for jumping in on that. Now, we are going to wrap up by talking explicitly about what you do. We've talked about building a system. We've talked about moving forward with screening, but making sure you're partnering with somebody to see how it works. We've talked about using multiple sources of data. Even 10 years ago, we would have said these recommendations to you. Wendy and I have written volumes about getting started with screening. And we want to make sure that before you screen, you build people's expertise, because you're right. If you're not screening right now and you're leaning in that direction, you don't want to just like come back and say, hey, fill out the screener. You want them to understand how the screening data will be used. It is not used to exclude a child. So just like Taylor and Denise are nodding their heads right now, thank you. That's right. We need to build a plan and then help people to understand, because in the beginning, teachers are worried about that. Like, who am I to say that? Teachers are awesome tests. Like, they see kids stressed, stretched. They see kids in social situations. We know that teachers are highly accurate. Sometimes people have said to Wendy and I, like, well, I'm worried this is too subjective. Is this really work? Yeah, we know it really works, because those data actually predict important outcomes for kids. But you have to have the structures in place, and we have to be responsible in our screening. So right now, in this COVID era, thinking in your tiered system, and again, the recommendation is not to switch systems, it's to solidify, shift, pivot, use the system that you've built. So we encourage you to continue with screening if you're doing it, and to select something that you feel comfortable implementing and sustaining if you're not yet doing it, and then engage in really high quality professional learnings so that teachers know how to use the data and how to collect it accurately, and paying attention to things like you should never email screening data. Like I mentioned, you should not use item level data to inform interventions. And we know that because we've tried it, and the field's tried it and we realized it was wrong. So we want to think about that. We want to also think about using multiple sources of data to inform instruction. Remember, screening is just a screener. It's like when you go to the blood, like go get your blood pressure checked at a doctor's office. It might be high because there is an issue. It could be that it's high because you're anxious about being at the doctor's office. So it is but one indicator. And then when we talk about screening responsibly, and please listen to this part carefully. If you are exploring the possibility of also adding on now parent completed screeners or student completed screeners, you must be prepared to respond to what they share. Everything we've been talking about today is a teacher completed screener. Remember, teachers are mandated reporters. So if they were aware that that child was a danger to themselves and others, or that they were being hurt, that would have been reported. So in reality, there's really no new information coming in a screener. It's just how that information is aggregated, put together. That's what's used to shape instruction. If you invite parent screenings now or student completed screenings, those are wonderful tools. Like if you look at the BAS 3 Best, there's a whole suite of tools that you can use to get the parent, the teacher, the student perspective. The same is true for the strength and difficulties questionnaire, but now you are bringing in new information. So if a child tells Nikki, like I circle this item that indicates I'm at heightened risk for or if I'm thinking about hurting myself, or if somebody is hurting me, you must respond to that. You cannot screen and then shelf that information. And remember, families are in really vulnerable situations right now. So be cautious. I'm not saying don't do it. I am saying be cautious about how you do that. And so when you think about the plans that you're building for next year and what you're going to solidify for students and for teachers to know, think carefully about what you're asking students to do academically, behaviorally. Teach those expectations the same way you would do it face-to-face. And remind them, we've been doing those soft skill lessons to be empowered, to help you make good decisions, to be able to advocate for yourself, to be able to adjust. Those things haven't changed. For the adults in your building, the same is true. Please think about how you're going to empower your teachers to do all these small shifts in their instruction while they're either remote and or in person. What will behavior specific praise look like in a remote environment? It might be positive praise specifically in the chat. It might be postcards home. It might be a follow-up phone call. It might be a shout out to the entire class. How are you going to build in choice? How are you going to increase kids' opportunities to respond? When I think about all the things that we're asking teachers to do, same stuff, teach expectations, practice it, give kids acknowledgements, weave in those soft skills. But when we're thinking about all these things that we're asking people to do, again, is it happening? How do people feel about, is it working? Is it happening is the fidelity. Stick with your tiered fidelity inventory. If that is the tool that you're using to look at tier 1 implementation, by all means, stay with that. If you have not yet assessed social validity, like what people think about the goals, the procedures, and the outcomes at tier 1, I urge you to do that. There's a tool called the Primary Intervention Rating Scale. And Wendy, if you don't mind typing that into the chat so people could find that. Whatever plan you build for next year, get some input from your teachers so that they have a voice in what their expectations are like for next year. And as we think right now about action planning for moving forward with systematic screening, for next year, I'd invite you to think carefully about what are the resources that are out there. And I do believe that some people are feeling super bombarded by all the well-intending things that are out there. I'm gonna encourage everybody to just take a breath. Take your existing system and let's think about how you can pivot it to be prepared to respond to instruction. So like on ci3t.org, you'll find an infographic that explains all the family resources that are there. I love that Kim also is highlighting some of the very fine products from the National Center. And she showed you that topic for next time that you're going to have about responding to schools in a crisis. Know that there's 3 other briefs that you're going to want to read, including, how to create a PBS behavior expectation for teaching in remote instruction. We're going to want to think about what are the specific tools that teachers are going to need to move forward for next year. And please remember, we're not working in a data-free environment. Educators are the best researchers, in my opinion. We use data every single day to make decisions about what to teach, how to teach. Is it working? Is it happening? And so remember that plan out your assessment schedule for next week. When I hop off this call, Wendy and I are have a district meeting and we're actually mapping out the 3 times a year they're going to do screenings. And that's what I want to leave you with. When you do your screenings for next year, there still will be 3 times a year. You wait 4 to 6 weeks after the year begins to do your first behavior screening. You do it again before winter break. It's a short period of time, but you're looking to see how kids are responding to tier 1 efforts. And then you screen again in spring. 2 important distinctions between academic screening and behavior screenings. Academic screenings require time with kids. You are not having any time with kids. So if Wendy was screening me and I'm a student in her class, she's not saying, Kathleen, are you internalizing today? Although when my kids were younger, I used to ask that. But she would instead would be independently completing these ratings on me to look to see how I'm doing. So no time with kids. And remember, the fall time point is later in the school year because we have to let that honeymoon roll off a little bit when kids come back. So you're going to screen 3 times a year, fall, 4 to 6 weeks after the school year begins. And we encourage you to push it closer to 6 this year. Secondly, screen in winter, then screen in spring. And the winter needs to happen before your winter break so you're prepared to respond. The other thing I just want to throw out for you, get your teams on it right now. Like if you're in a CI3T school, your CI3T leadership team, whatever it is, make sure you got regular time points so that they're prepared to learn. And if you would like, you get the best professional learning from Patty and Kim. There are no 2 finer people in the world, in my opinion, in terms of professional learning. You've got the right conversations going. If you want to expand your circle, you're welcome to come and join Wendy and I for these dates for Empower. At the end of July, we'll post these new times and topics for you. And the reason these are all TBAs right now, to be determined, is we've done a giant survey across 5 districts in 3 different states to find out what people think they need to know right now. And that's what we're building. And we're excited for that. We also have monthly calls where people drop in to ask questions about screenings and supports. These dates and times are set. And this is very informal. So it's like speed dating for professional learning. You don't have to commit to anything long-term. Just show up. If you have questions, feel free. We don't record anything because we want you to feel comfortable just coming in and saying, okay, I think I'm a hot mess. And here's where I'm at and here's where I need some help. So thank you so much. You guys are awesome. And I just want to say, oh, thanks, Nikki, you're sweet. I just want to say that although this is a great time of tremendous stress and it's frightening, as I said, I'm a mother and I'm a researcher and there's a lot going on in the world, but I have to say the thing that I appreciate right now that I am absolutely inspired by is the field of education. Our entire community dropped everything to figure out a way to help to continue to educate our kids. And right now the world is moving forward with making sure that the total child is supported. So people are, for the first time, not trying to deal with academics separately from behavior and social and emotional well-being. This is a gift in a way. And I do think that our new normal could be, as George talked about, being a better new normal. So you inspire me, go out, take care of yourself, wash your hands, feed and water yourself, exercise. And thank you to Kim and Patty, Wendy, and I greatly appreciate you being here.